Building an argument.
Now that you have a strong introductory thesis, it's time to craft a knockout argument for the body of your paper. The purpose of your argument paper is to convince the audience that your ideas are valid. To do this, you will need to use different appeals, or persuasion strategies.
The Greek philosopher Aristotle came up with terms logos, ethos, and pathos to describe the three ways we try to appeal to our audience. Together we call them Aristotle's appeals.
In short, logos is the argument's appeal to the audience's need for logic and reasoning. Ethos is the argument's appeal to the audience's need for author credibility. And pathos is the argument's appeal to the audience's need for emotion.
Strong arguments use a mix of all three appeals to persuade an audience. We'll discuss each appeal and explain how to use them to hold up your thesis statement and structure your dent-proof argument.
Let's begin with logos, the appeal to logic and reason. This appeal supports the thesis statement by using data, definitions, statistics, quotations, facts, numbers, graphs, dates, evidence, citations from experts, and inductive and deductive reasoning.
The skeptics in your audiences need hard facts to be convinced. Each time you make a claim, you must back it up with factual evidence. For example, if you're trying to convince your parents to let you drive the car more often, bombard them with facts. Show them aced driver's ed tests. Create a graph demonstrating your perfect driving record. And quote your driver's ed teacher praising your skills.
To supplement your data, you could also try some inductive and deductive reasoning. These are reasoning strategies that appeal to the logical nature of your audience.
Inductive reasoning takes a specific fact or case and draws generalizations and conclusions from that case.
Inductive reasoning usually works best with observations and experiences. Here's an example.
My friend Janelle is allowed to borrow the car to go to volleyball practice as long as her grades are good. If it worked for her, it can work for us. Inductive reasoning is most effective when there are many strong specific cases from which to draw a generalization.
Don't give up if that doesn't work. Let's take a look at the deductive reasoning approach.
Deductive reasoning takes a general statement, then applies it to a specific case.
Deductive reasoning usually works best with laws, rules, and accepted principles. Watch how it works in the car borrowing example.
I'm 17 years old, legally old enough to drive. Also, I have a driver's license, which is society's way of saying, go drive. Therefore, you should let me borrow the car more often. It also never hurts to say please. Good luck with that. Let's move on to ethos.
As we said before, ethos is the appeal to credibility. Ethos supports the thesis by giving the writer integrity and credibility. When an audience believes that the writer is trustworthy, they are more likely to be persuaded.
How are you supposed to show your understanding nature in the pages of a composition assignment? There are ways. First, establish a respectful tone. Also, make sure you accurately state the opposing viewpoints in your refutation and rebuttal. That way, your opposition will know you did your research. Speaking of research, make sure your sources are reliable and high quality to give your claim integrity. Make sure your paper is easy to read and organized. This will tell your reader you took the time and care to craft the argument. Appearances do matter, so make sure your paper looks neat and clean, and proofread for any typos or grammar mistakes.
Back to the car borrowing example. Ethos in action looks like this. Give respect to the family car. Keep the car washed, waxed, vacuumed, full of gas. Or, instead of unabashed begging, Mom, come on! Come on! Offer to run errands. And for the love of minivans, don't get any moving violations.
So if you used logos, ethos, or both to appeal to your parents and you still didn't get the keys, try tugging at their heartstrings with an appeal to pathos. Have them recollect their own youth. Try saying, "Don't you remember what it was like to be a teenager?"
As we mentioned before, pathos is an appeal to emotion. Pathos supports your thesis by appealing to the audience's feelings, needs, and values. Pathos is successful when your audience identifies with your viewpoint and has empathy for your subject.
Ways to appeal with pathos in your paper include telling individual stories or using anecdotes about emotionally charged situations. Interviews also work to make your subject relatable and compelling to your audience. Using vivid imagery and description can also help an emotional appeal by tapping into your audience's imagination. Journalistic photos and images can be very effective in reaching out to your audience's emotions.
But be careful about being too emotional. You don't want to distract your audience from your thesis or try to use shock to scare your audience into thinking the way you do. Instead of backing statements and claims with emotion, make sure your logical examples are rich and interesting rather than just one statistic after the other.
Remember, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Your facts must be reliable in order to be credible. If your data is flawed, then you'll lose points on credibility and logic. Too much emotion can harm your credibility, and too little will bore your audience.